Assalamualaikum and hello everybody, those who are watching us from Facebook Live and those who are watching us from YouTube Live. Welcome to another sharing session by Ami Hushairi and Associates. Tonight, the topic for our sharing session will be, is an unstamped agreement valid in Malaysia? And for those of you who is also wondering the same thing, stay tuned to know more. So before we start our sharing session, let me first introduce myself. My name is Aimi Shahira. I am a third-year law student in the Faculty of Law, UiTM Shah Alam. I am currently doing my internship at Ami Hushairi and Associates, and I couldn't be more happier to be here. And I will be your host for tonight. Joining with us is one of the partners in Ami Hushairi and Associates, none other than Encik Nik Erman. His focus area is in sports law, commercial, and corporate law. Hello, Encik Nik. How are you?
Hi, Amy. Thank you for being the host today.
Thank you, Nik. Thank you for being here. All right, so now that you know us, let's get this sharing session started, shall we? Okay, and Nik, first and foremost, do you mind briefly explaining to us what is a stamped agreement and why is it necessary for an agreement to be stamped?
Okay, thank you, Amy. So first of all, to our listeners, you need to understand that agreement can be done orally or in written form. So what we're talking here is a written agreement. A written agreement needs to be stamped. So where do you need to stamp it? It's at LSDN, Lembaga Hasil Dalam Negeri, or in English is Inland Revenue Board. And how much? Another question that is also asked quite often is how much is the stamping fee? It actually depends on the type of agreement and the value of the agreement. All that is in the Stamp Act. So you don't need to fret about how much. Just ask your lawyer. Your lawyer will calculate it for you. So then the other reason why you need to stamp it is because it's actually in the Act that an agreement that is not stamped cannot be used as evidence in court.
Mm-hmm. I see, Nik. That's very interesting. Another question, what would happen if an unstamped agreement was still to be admitted to the court as evidence by the parties?
Okay, so if you do not stamp your agreement, what happens is when you bring it to court, you still need to stamp it. So you need to pay the stamp fees plus penalty. So the penalty is usually calculated 30 days after the date of the agreement. So if it's 1 year after, then it's 1 year penalty, 2 years, and so forth.
Okay. If that is the legal situation currently, then wouldn't individual rights still be protected in an unstamped agreement?
Yes, it will still be protected because what our listeners need to understand is an unstamped agreement is still valid. However, in order for it to be admissible in court, you need to stamp it.
Okay, Nik. Are there any examples or instances you can tell us pertaining to this matter?
Okay, I've come across a few people who have been quite creative in trying to find their way out of an agreement by saying, okay, this agreement is not stamped, so this is not valid, so I'm not going to follow it. So I can't blame them for trying, but the law is clear. Even though it's not stamped, it's still a valid agreement. So the rights are still protected. So that is another thing that I often receive, that parties are concerned that because they forgot to stamp it, that the agreement is not valid. So I wish to repeat that unstamped agreement is still valid. It's just that when you bring it to court as evidence, you need to stamp it plus penalty. And another thing is that another thing situation which I've come across is a few people have do not want to stamp it because of the cost. Because certain agreements are quite expensive. So what they tell me is, can I stamp it later? What I usually tell them is, if you don't stamp it now, you bring it to court later, you pay penalties. So it's going to be actually double, triple, quadruple your actual cost that you actually need to pay. So I always tell them, stamp your agreement even though it's expensive, because you never know if you might need to bring that agreement to court.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I do agree that to Encik Nick. That's very interesting. So to sum up the discussion, this would mean the court will order for an agreement to first be stamped for it to be admissible, whereas the rights of parties in an unstamped agreement won't be affected. Thus, an unstamped agreement is considered valid in Malaysia. Is this right, Encik Nick?
Yes, that's correct, Amy.
Okay, I think the listeners are actually pretty relieved to hear the fact that unstamped agreement is still considered as valid. And we had a wonderful time, and our sharing session has unfortunately come to an end. And Chitney, is there anything you would like to say before we end this discussion?
Okay, I would always advise do your costing properly because an agreement um, always stamp your agreement and make sure you do your costing properly when you do your agreement. Make sure you calculate the stamping fees in your budget. That is the problem, especially I'm talking about, especially if you're referring to business owners. Business owners seldom budget legal costs and stamping fees. So that's why it's important when you do any agreement, especially a business agreement, please budget for legal fees plus stamping because the problems will be worse off if you do not stamp the agreement and when you do the agreement.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I agree with that as well. And for those listeners, please do hear the advice because it's coming from the best. And thank you so much to Encik Nate for sharing with us such insightful legal perspective pertaining this matter. And I hope everybody has enjoyed your time with us. Thank you for sparing your time with us. And if you have any questions, do leave your questions in the comment section and we will try to respond it as best as we could. Don't forget to share this sharing session to everyone you know. And until next time, good night, everyone.
Thank you, Amy, for being the host for today's session.
Thank you, Encik Nate.
Thank you, everyone.